Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to those of you who are joining us from across the world today for another edition of Pandemic Punditries, putting the planet on a pandemic diet, brought to you by the Content Experience Company. We are delighted and honored to have Lou Cooperhouse, President, CEO of BlueNalu, an innovative cellular aquaculture company that has raised $8.5 million from investors in 11 different countries. Welcome to Pandemic Punditry, Lou.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on your show.
Thank you. So, Lou, just for the for the benefit of our viewing audience, maybe you can give them some context as to sort of the problem that you're trying to solve through BlueNalu. And for example, in your opinion, what ails our oceans? Why is our seafood stocks declining globally? And therefore the reason for what BlueNalu is trying to do.
No, I appreciate that first question. Interestingly, my background is over 35 years in the food industry, and one thing I've realized is in the food industry there happens to be one very vulnerable supply chain, and I've been thinking about this for a long time. And kind of, if you get philosophical about it, if you look on a restaurant menu, there might only be one item that says market price. That actually means that. And another way of saying it is, I don't know. So this talks about how vulnerable our supply chain is to seafood. And I've been studying the food industry. I realized that people are shifting away from red meat for the health reasons, and they're migrating towards seafood. In fact, we have the highest per capita consumption of seafood on the planet right now. And you also read about how as incomes are rising around the world, GDP goes up, people are consuming more protein in the diet, more seafood. So here we have an increasing demand, which is a very relevant factor. But the challenge that exists is there's just a diminishing supply. We fundamentally have a supply chain gap. We cannot feed the world. And furthermore, there's such a vulnerable supply chain. Unlike land animals, which are things that we can predict, we can count, sea animals are so vulnerable, very subject to climatic events, warming oceans, acidification, environmental pollution, certainly nuclear disasters, algae blooms. So here you have this vulnerable supply chain. And furthermore, consumers are increasingly aware about human health issues, microplastics, toxins, mercury, that could in fact be in the seafood they're consuming. So in the end of the day, you have so many different factors. You have the fact that it's a very unsustainable industry today, being shipped maybe 10,000 miles from point of capture to point of consumption, experiencing perhaps 30% or 50% bycatch while being caught in the oceans, then being flown all those long distances, and then only experiencing, say, a 60% yield, once at the restaurant. So you have such a huge environmental footprint. You have very unsustainable practices that could exist, and you have arguably a very inefficient solution, which, if you will, is a bit biblical. So as I look at the seafood opportunity, we just need to feed the world, and I'm just concerned about the human health issues that could exist in the future, and just the potential lack of supply that's going to exist as well. So BlueNalu's solution is to actually create a third solution, wild-caught, farm-raised, now cell-based, a third solution that complements our global supply chain that we describe as healthy for people, humane for sea life, and sustainable for our planet, and also providing us increased food security as we launch these products around the world. So again, seafood is just such a unique challenge, and the cell-based solution is such an amazing transformative opportunity to really help complement this global supply chain that is so desperately needed.
Yeah, well said. I think a lot of people who are not in the space, in the food space, especially in the smart protein space, don't realize that the piece of fish on their plate goes through a whole lot of challenges that you so aptly described. And I think the market price indicator on the menu is a great way to sort of put that story across. But Lou, what you're doing at BlueNalu is not something that new, right? If I may quote Winston Churchill, we shall escape the absurdity of growing a whole chicken in order to eat a breast or a wing by growing these parts separately under a suitable medium. The new foods will be practically indistinguishable from the natural products from the onset, and any changes will be so gradual as to escape observation. Wow, this is 1931. He was pretty. That was quite a visionary statement, in my opinion. What is your reaction to that, and how are you sort of fulfilling essentially, Winston Churchill's vision of using science to put food on the plate?
No, he was, again, absolutely an amazing visionary. He actually published that, as you may know, in something called 50 Years Hence. He thought this might happen in 50 years. It's now about 90 years later,
right?
But nonetheless, interestingly, 50 years ago, or not even that far back, but I'm sorry, more like 30 years ago. I take it back again. It was 50 years ago. 50 years ago was the 1980s, 1970s. I'm sorry. In the early 1970s was the onset of the computer generation.
Right.
So that was, again, another beginning of something totally transformative. And obviously years before that with Winston Churchill. So he was absolutely right that science can in fact develop something which is what's so amazing about this process of cell cultured protein is not only can it create healthier products that are humane and really can displace animal products, but it's just so clearly needed to feed the world. And to his point, these products are in fact 100% yielded. So in the case of fish, as I mentioned before, you have a 60% yield at a restaurant if you're lucky. And what that means is heads, tails, bones, skin. Sadly, all that goes into the trash in many cases. There's only so much fish stock maybe a restaurant can make. So in this case, just as Winston Churchill projected, we can actually make just what people want to consume. In our case, just the fillet. So it is in fact an extraordinary solution, and I wish he was here alive today to really see the advent of these technologies.
So we got the industry in general got a bit of a boost the other day from Bill Gates calling for synthetic meat. I know that we in the space cringe when he used the word synthetic. There is absolutely nothing synthetic about it. It's a process that's of course scientific and mechanical and everything else, but the product is as natural or better than natural as you can get. Correct, Lou?
It's not better than natural. It is natural though. I mean, it is the same as fish. It has all the same nutritional characteristics. It has same amino acid profile, for example, same amount of omega-3s. It actually performs the same functionally. What I mean by that is, if I'm a chef and I'm preparing it, I might typically prepare it one of three ways. I might serve it to you raw. I might serve it to you cooked. This cooked might mean steamed, or grilled, or seared, or sautéed, or pan-fried, deep-fried. So we actually were able to demonstrate that our product had the same characteristics, whether prepared raw, cooked in all those different ways, or prepared in like an acidified solution, as is commonly used. Somebody's preparing, say, a poke or a kimchi or ceviche. In all those situations, we were able to demonstrate that our product has the same structural integrity. So it is, in fact, the same as a conventional seafood. And in fact, that's what the regulatory agencies want to see, that you're making a product that really is the same. Therefore, it should be labeled the same. And it is the same. As you may recall, it's not a process, it's not a name. You mentioned synthetic. We don't, obviously, it's not, we don't like the word synthetic. We don't like the word lab made. We're actually using the term, now cell cultured. It's a very neutral term, defines what it is, but also defines what it's not. It's not wild caught or farm raised, and it's not confused with either of those perhaps names. So therefore, people should know that they are purchasing something that is different. And we want them to, because we actually want them to realize that this product, that what's different about it, unlike conventional seafood, there's no mercury, there's no microplastics, there's no antibiotics, there's no pollutants, and of course it's extremely sustainable. So we're excited to tell consumers about our product and our process, and we're very proud of that.
Great. That's why I said it's better than natural, because natural tends to have all of those things in it. All right, Karthika, your turn.
I'm careful with it because the regulatory authorities want it to be the same as natural, but of course it is different in those kind of ways. So
True.
It's a fine line how you communicate the benefits.
True. Karthika, I know you've been itching to get in.
Fair enough. Thanks, Lou. So Lou, it's our understanding that you created a growth medium that doesn't require FBS. So does this mean your growth medium is proprietary, and is it plant-based?
It's the whole industry, as you're probably aware, is totally moved away from fetal bovine serum. It clearly doesn't belong in any kind of cell-based, cell-cultured product at all. So our company, of course, has already accomplished that. We did that early on in the development of our company. We're very proud of that. Others in the industry have done the same. So it's a pretty disgusting process, frankly, what it is. Not to mention it's very expensive. It's very, very variable. It just doesn't belong, literally. And in fact, we have committed to an animal-free media composition. Of course, there is an animal, it's fish. So therefore, if you're allergic to fish, you'll be allergic to our product. But there's no animal-based components in our media solution at all.
Thanks, Lou. But you've also developed a cell-based whole muscle yellowtail amberjack. Is that correct? And was that done without the aid of scaffolding?
That's correct. Even to take a step back, our company has really focused on finfish very broadly. And when I say that, we're talking about finfish versus crustaceans or mollusks. So with finfish, to your point, our first product that we developed was yellowtail amberjack. Since then, we've developed mahi-mahi, red snapper, and bluefin tuna. So just a wide array of species that we developed without genetic engineering, but also without the use of scaffolding. What's really very opportunistic, frankly, about seafood is it doesn't have the same structural challenges. If you go to the physiology of seafood, is not nearly as complex. It doesn't have the complexity, for example, of red meat. Maybe to say it, I find a way to kind of say it very philosophically. There's a reason you cut, steak with a steak knife. You might cut fish with a fork. Flakes, and therefore the physical structure, the physiology of the fish is a lot simpler. It doesn't require some of the more complex components that might be found in other cell structures.
So that's. Do you consider the lack of the use of scaffolding is sort of a proprietary USP for you, because, or is it more a function of the fact that the fish that you're choosing to produce doesn't require scaffolding, or is it that you've come up with a proprietary process that negates the need for use of a third-party scaffolding?
We have a proprietary process for sure, and a significant amount of IP of the company.
Okay.
At this point in time, we don't feel we will need scaffolding for any of our seafood products. But of course, you never know as we get into other types of species that might have different physical structure requirements. But thus far, we have not had a need for that at all. And so that's probably the best way to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, the pictures that I saw on the website and elsewhere, they look so realistic. I mean, it's amazingly, it's got the texturing like a piece of fish would have, and it's amazing. So you have interestingly a strategy that you're calling consumer-driven market strategy. And you've picked these species, yellowfin, mahi-mahi, red snapper, and bluefin tuna. It seems that the strategy is based on what consumers are consuming or the market is demanding in terms of seafood, especially fish. And then you're capability is to be able to sort of rise to meet that demand on almost dynamically. So if tomorrow somebody needs red snapper, 20 tons of that as opposed to say bluefin tuna, you're able to sort of scale it up and scale it down almost like an on-demand, AWS cloud system, right? So this is sort of an amazing sort of ability to manufacture on demand, which nothing in the seafood industry has. I mean, a boat goes out to sea, you don't know what the hell you'll catch. A farm either grows a type of fish or another, and then in the cycle they may be not ready for harvest for another week. So I mean, they're not able to pull that out and put it on the table. So this is sort of a completely, it's almost like the Henry Ford version of manufacturing that you're bringing to BlueNalu and to fish. Am I correct in that kind of characterization?
You characterize it very well. The way I describe it similarly is today's model of seafood is supply restricted. We sell what we catch. When you talk to experts in the seafood industry, the first thing they talk about is the greatest challenge is supply chain. So what BlueNalu is doing is just that. It's an absolute paradigm shift, converting today's supply restricted model to instead a demand-driven model. We could literally democratize seafood. It's a very unique thing to say. We could sell what people want to purchase and no longer be restricted to sell what we catch. It is a total game changer, and furthermore, to your point, as I mentioned earlier, there's containers that are going over that are unsold. And, and literally, to your point also, if a seafood species went on the watch list, God forbid there's an environmental disaster, it's no longer available, price goes through the roof, BlueNalu can literally turn on production and make that product just a few weeks later and fill that global gap. So it is, for the first time, a very, very significant paradigm shift for the seafood supply chain. Really can be a game changer. Obviously, we need to get many factories up and running to actually have that capacity, but that's exactly where this is going. It's creating a demand-driven model for the first time.
I think that dovetails nicely into Karthika's question to follow on the factories challenge. Yeah, go ahead, Karthika.
Indeed. So Lou, could you share with us the rationale for using notes to raise your last round of funding, which was worth $60 million, right? And what advice would you sort of give entrepreneurs in the smart protein space when it comes to fundraising and the different ways in which they could do that?
No, it's just a brief history. You're right. So we raised a seed round back in early 2018 for $4.5 million. And we closed on an A round about a year ago for $20 million, and then we just raised $60 million, 60, in a convertible note financing. I guess my advice would be, it's true for any entrepreneur, and I obviously spent a whole career in startup companies and also mentoring others. It's really beginning the company. Our total focus has been on what does it take to achieve scale production, and really to think about what success looks like from the very beginning. And it, in a way, kind of work backwards, from what does a profitable factory look like? How many factories will be required? What is the type of model that might make sense to actually build these facilities around the world? And therefore, if you kind of work backwards, so from that model, I developed this 5-phase strategy kind of shortly after the company was founded. So my advice would be, first of all, begin with a really disciplined approach to what success looks like. Put together a very strategy to accomplish all the goals that are required. In our case, the biology, the operations, the engineering, the regulatory strategy, the market development strategy. Another big point is partnerships. So what we're very proud of is that we've attracted 6 strategic partners thus far, all of which have invested in BlueNalu. Some in the supply chain, like Greco from the Netherlands, Griffith Foods in the United States, and others in marketing, operations, sales, distribution. They being Moana from South Korea, Sumitomo from Japan, rich products from the USA, most recently Thai Union, Thailand, of course, also the global presence from one of the companies in the world. So we're very excited that these companies are working with us to really help us develop a cost of goods strategy. So our success will be, all of our collective success will be driving the cost down of our products, so we can ultimately achieve price parity. Also to have global partners that really already have those relationships and give us access to customers. And we really see such a great example in Asia, where the consumption of seafood is somewhere around 3 to 5 times the per capita consumption that it is in America or in Europe.
Right.
And GDP increases, that demand will even be greater. And again, our supply just can't keep up. So very excited to continue to plant seeds in Asia, of course, Europe and North America, Latin America as well. This is a global opportunity. So my advice is kind of those areas of really thinking large and building a partnership strategy early on, working very holistically, and most importantly, bring on just an amazing team. We're blessed at BlueNalu to have just an expert team of scientists and engineers, market development experts, regulatory experts, and it's really an interdisciplinary team that really will lead to all of our success. And like with any company, that's certainly your most important asset, and that's clearly our most important asset for
Good, great pieces of advice there. I was just also wondering, when you put all this great set of partnerships together and had sort of a global perspective and orientation from day one, given your understanding of how the seafood markets work globally, was that harnessing some of the networks that you had built in your past in 35 years of sort of being in the food industry, or is this something that you actively sought as a part of this incarnation in your career?
These were not pre-existing relationships, so they were all new ones. But it's really because I do come from the food industry, and I specifically sought out supply chain partners that could create greater value. So I was just really thinking about what kind of partners made the most sense. And the same thing happened on the other side. On the supply chain, Nutreco, as one of the largest agriculture suppliers in the world, we're feeding our living fish cells from the same thing that Nutreco is feeding to living fish. It's amino acids, salt, sugars, lipids, vitamins, minerals. Our fish cells need the same thing. And this industry is moving from farmer grade to food grade. So what better partner would there be to work with than a leader in really supplying agriculture feed? Griffith Foods, for example, is an expert in food science and culinary, can really help us with the sensory optimization to make sure that our products really do have the same taste, experiences, and expectations that consumers are looking for. As I think about where the markets are, Thai Union, Moana, rich products, we all have tremendous relationships with consumers, understand the market, and really help us access that marketplace as we build those factors in the future.
So true to what you just said earlier, you actually sort of strategically decided who you wanted to partner with, given what you wanted done and the expertise that you were seeking and the relationships you were seeking, and then actively pursued that as a part of your growth strategy. Amazing. You mentioned something about the fish cells. I was curious. I think I read somewhere that it's from the outside of the fish, it's external to the fish. What does that really mean? Is it from the skin of the fish, something like that, or is it an existing cell line you're using, or how is that procured? The initial sort of cell.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you read, but that's not correct. But what we're actually starting with is very similar to others in the industry.
Okay.
Well, that everybody else is going to. But in our case, the fish that you might have, for example, on your virtual plate in front of you right now.
Right.
If you were to take a microscope and look at that fish, you would see perhaps 3 different cell types. You might see yourself, that's a very lean fish, a very fatty fish. When you're describing it, there might be a lot of muscle cells in that lean fish, proportionally, or there might be a lot of fat cells or adipocytes in that fish for free, if you will, flavor profile. So what we're doing at BlueNalu is we're literally isolating the precursor cells muscle or fat, and also connective tissue. These are cells that were destined to be muscle cells and fat cells. So that's the most natural, if you will, approach that one could accomplish. That's what we're doing now. So we're actually isolating those cells, muscle, fat, and connective tissue. And then we found a way to have them continue doubling and doubling, ultimately creating the billions and billions of cells that result in a stable cell line that can be frozen and then thawed later, and the viability returns, and then those cells become the starting material in our bioreactors as we build our future factories. So we're literally creating, many cell lines, different fin fish species across different cell types. Basically, all the building blocks come from the actual fish, from the inside of the fish, not from the skin at all, but from the actual muscle, fat, or connective tissue within the fish.
Okay, so that's interesting. So it's the muscle cells, it's the fat cells, and the connective tissue cells that you're using. I think we have a little bit of an audio challenge sometimes, Lou. You seem to be cutting in and out a little bit. Can we just do a quick check? I think when you speak maybe a little backwards, it seemed to be better than before. So let's just, maybe there's a mic that's, can you just quickly do it? Can you hear us okay now?
I hear you fine. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah, perfect, actually. Yeah, so I think that's fine. That's perfectly audible. All right, great. Sorry, Karthika.
No
I've been
worries.
monopolizing the time. It's been a fascinating discussion so far. Go ahead.
Lou, we want to now try and kind of really dig deep into the name and BlueNalu, the movement. So what are you doing to sort of inspire this new wave of thinking, which you're calling the BlueNalu movement?
No, it's thank you for that question. So interestingly, the name, BlueNalu, many people may not know what the word Nalu is, but Nalu is a Hawaiian word for wave. And actually, the company was founded in Hawaii when I was actually doing a fair amount of consulting over the past 10 years. And Hawaii is an interesting place. It's the center of the Pacific Ocean, the center of where many of our fish species come from, about 2,500 miles from any major landmass. And it's also, the word Nalu is interesting as well because it's also slang in Hawaiian for, you might say to somebody, Nalu it. That means, hey, go with the flow. But it's also about being thoughtful and conscious and considerate. So it has some other kind of subtle meanings about being very thoughtful. And what we're really trying to do at BlueNalu is be very thoughtful in a variety of ways. So we believe we're very thoughtful about the species that we're targeting, for example. Mm-hmm. We're specifically targeting fish that are typically overfished or illegally fished or high in mercury or other contaminants, and also are typically imported. We recognize that many traditional farmers might be concerned. And in the United States, for example, mahi-mahi is imported at somewhere between 85 and 90%, primarily from Peru, Ecuador, Taiwan. And in fact, mahi-mahi cannot be farm raised at all. They're very aggressive fish, and they can't be farm raised effectively at all. So what we're doing here is we're not only creating products that are healthy for people, humane for sea life, and sustainable, but also products that create jobs and build factories. And that's our strategy around the world, to really work with local economies and make healthier products, but also work in partnership with the seafood industry to really supplement and complement existing wild-caught or farm-raised fisheries. But another thing we're doing at BlueNalu is, when we talk about the BlueNalu movement, if you will, I actually trademarked the term Eat Blue. And Eat Blue, we even have a website, eat.blue, is really developed after the concept of Go Green. Go Green that many of us are familiar with, that goes back several decades, about getting consumers to be more active in recycling efforts. So I created that same logic. All of us need to make an effort to have more sustainable purchases and to eat blue, to be thoughtful about the foods they consume, make sustainable choices, learned. So the first change, as I learned in the food industry, the first way to get people to change their behavior begins with awareness. Awareness of the global seafood problems we have today. Many people have, frankly, a strong appreciation for terrestrial animals, cows and chickens and pigs, but they don't think the same way about fish. And in fact, sadly, fish die a very horrible death. People don't think about it, but they typically suffocate, or they get depressurized, or in some cases, as we know, they may be boiled alive. So there's no consideration, frankly, for the death of seafood, where land animals, sad that they die, but they actually, there are measures in place to make sure it's a humane situation. So part of Eat Blue is not to be, negative about, the seafood industry at all, but really to make people aware of seafood and sustainable practices, how important it is to the economy, but also how important it is to make sustainable choices. And it's so confusing between wild caught and farm raised, one species to the other, and people just don't understand about fish, and they just don't even know what to order on a menu. It's a very confusing category. Mm-hmm. Always has been, still is, and our goal with Eat Blue is to really, help, rise the tide, if you will, and create more awareness about better choices with seafood.
Quick follow-up question, Karthika, if I may. You mentioned economic impact, and I was just pondering, this is something, as Karthika and I are both vegans, and people constantly ask us, so what will happen to all the dairy farmers in the world, and what will happen to all the meat farmers in the world and all that? So I'm sure this will eventually get asked from people like yourselves, what's going to happen to all the fishermen in the world, right? I mean, the mythological idea is there are lots of small fishermen walking around in small crude boats, not the heavy factory trawlers and boats that are dominant in the industry. But what is the response to that? I mean, is BlueNalu, going to put the people out of business where that's concerned, or?
We don't think so at all. I mean, I come back to the supply chain challenge. What BlueNalu is all about is really helping to fill that gap. There's such an increasing demand. If you look for somewhere north of 30 years, the amount of capture from the wild has been flat. We are not getting any more fish from the ocean, and it's slightly declining year after year. And as we know, many species are diminishing considerably. Aquaculture is trying its best to keep up. And there are challenges with aquaculture and really keeping up at all. And there's many new methods that are being identified. But to answer your question, we really see a world where wild-caught, farm-raised, and cell-based will all be a solution, because there is such an increasing demand. The organizations, it's really the industrial fishermen, certainly the traditional coastal fishermen in some of these economically depressed communities. They rely on local fishermen, and the economies are heavily reliant on that as a economic source of income. We don't feel that will ever be an issue to really where that could possibly be disrupted or displaced. It's really, first of all, meeting the supply chain gap that's going to continue to escalate, but also there probably will be some inroads on certain species, like bluefin tuna, for example, very limited global supply. And most of that supply a lot of that supply, frankly, is illegally caught. And a lot of it goes to Japan. So BlueNalu, what we can do is we could actually, totally democratize bluefin tuna, and hopefully leave more bluefin tuna in the ocean, because when I say democratize, it can no longer be restricted to those that can afford it. But in fact, we can perhaps make it more affordable and more enjoyed by people around the world by having it being produced locally. So again, it's a total paradigm shift to have a sustainable, available year-round, mercury-free, by the way, bluefin tuna. Right now it's one of those predatory fish that's very high in mercury content. So our product has so many benefits and can be enjoyed by all. So we really see a world where we can clearly all work together. No question.
Great answer. Karthika?
Thanks, Lavi. So Lou, just speaking a little bit more about the BlueNalu movement and BlueNalu itself, what kind of impact or legacy would you want to leave as the founder of BlueNalu?
No, I think to me, BlueNalu is such an amazing opportunity. My whole career has, everything I've ever done or learned has really led to this moment. And I am so excited. What I've even found is, we talked before about how this world is changing. We're seeing consumers that are seeking sustainable products. We're seeing investors that are making a commitment to ESG. And we're seeing employees looking to work at mission-driven companies. This is the time. We are the front end of a global transformation of our protein supply. Absolutely. This is really going to be very historical and very transformative, unlike anything, in my opinion, that this planet has ever seen when it comes to food supply. What will be done in the next 2 decades will be really, really significant. So for me, on a legacy point of view, I'm just excited to be at the front end of this, hopefully to launch the first really successful cell-based seafood company, and giving the world, a better option, for seafood that they thought they could never have again. Even think of pregnant nursing women who today in the United States, there's warning about consuming seafood at all. 0 servings, 1 or 2 to 3 servings per week. With BlueNalu, you can have as much as you want. So we're bringing back seafood that you can enjoy, you can trust, you can feel confident that it's healthy, it's also humane, it's sustainable for nations around the world. It creates food security. So again, from a legacy point of view, I'm just so excited to be really leading a team, and all of us are so committed to this success. And it's just a wonderful opportunity, and my peers around the world are too. So we're all very excited to be, really at the front end of this transformation. I can only imagine how people in the computer industry felt in the 70s, but this is so much different because this is about food, and food is so emotional. We all are so connected. No disrespect to computers, but we're all so connected to food, and it's our life, and it's our religion, and it's something that's really, societal and social and personal, that, we're excited to be able to share this with everybody else on the planet.
So Lou, I mean, your in your vision, you could be in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, middle of a desert, and you could have absolutely fresh fish served because you got a factory out there, correct? And that's the vision, right? Essentially, you're unencumbered by being close to the ocean, being close to the supply chain, all of that, right? So this is sort of the complete, if you were in Mars, you could possibly have amberjack tuna. Elon Musk. All right. So that's the vision, right? I mean, essentially, this is the evolution of this technological race, the Winston Churchill vision to sort of, essentially you can have your chicken or your breast or your leg or your mahi steak pretty much anywhere on Earth or even on Mars.
It's true. It could be in a space station, it could be on Mars, could be in Saudi Arabia, it could be central United States. Right. You're right. You're no longer, if you think about it, people who don't consume much seafood is because it's just not available. So this, for the first time, we can make seafood, on demand, as you mentioned earlier, available anywhere in the world. It's a little bit, model's a little similar to vertical farming. It's the same concept of taking farms where they're not, that they're available year round under roof, producing, amazing quantities, maybe 300 to 400 times the volume per acre. But that's what we're doing with seafood. We are a farm of a sort, manufacturing large volumes of seafood, close to population centers and no longer close to coast, where people are more used to getting seafood traditionally.
Karthika?
Thanks, Lavi. So Lou, you described what BlueNalu is doing as providing an alternative solution for consumers who are looking for seafood products, right? So respectfully, we beg to differ, and we think from our perspective, your solution is not an alternative, but an altogether sort of different category of food, planet-friendly seafood. Would you agree with that categorization?
I do agree with you. It's funny. I think this industry, right or wrongly, that's called this alternative seafood, but it's not alternative at all. It is same as seafood. You know, it's seafood without the sea, if you will, or other fancy ways of describing what we're doing here. You're absolutely right. It's not alternative. It is same as seafood. And interestingly, some of the projections have identified that conventional meats will become unconventional over the next 2 decades. That cell-based or cell-cultured foods and plant-based will make up the majority of the proteins we consume by the year 2040. That are what some projections have indicated. I believe that's very, very attainable, very possible. And in the case, however, of cell-based, it is same as. Plant-based is a wonderful option too, but obviously that is not, an animal product. We're making is in fact an animal product without the animal from its very cells. So again, if you're allergic to seafood, you'll be allergic to this. But it's it's arguably not for it's not a vegan product because it's an animal product. But many people, as you know, that choose to not eat animals, they do so for ethical reasons, and perhaps they might feel comfortable consuming our products because it was made in an ethical process.
Yeah, well said. So, Karthika, any more final thoughts?
No, I'm good actually, Lavi. This has been such a fascinating conversation, and I've learned a ton about obviously seafood and aquaculture and the different challenges that the shall we say the traditional seafood industry faces, and how consumers are unaware of how fish are being treated. So I think it's important that all of us try and practice mindful consumption, or BlueNalu, as Lou would say, and be mindful of our choices and what we eat.
Yeah, well said. So
eat blue.
And eat blue. Eat blue. I love that, by the way. Eat blue is a great way to go. But so Lou, thank you again for spending a considerable amount of your evening with us on Pandemic Punditry. Really exciting to see this unfold as the years and months go on. I think people seem to be very astounded or put this whole alternative smart protein space on the map with Beyond's IPO. Oatly's coming around. That could be a game changer. I think a lot of attention is going to fall on these alternative from a market standpoint, from a dollars and cents standpoint, which is always good, I guess. But I think BlueNalu is definitely a company to watch because you are going at the heart of sort of this fish seafood industry, and hopefully you're the first out of the gate with a rather large announcement to come. So we'll love to continue to keep in touch with you and keep us posted. And you're welcome back on the show at any time.
Thank you, and we love to build a factory in India someday soon. So hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years, or even sooner if we can.
Oh, it'll be fabulous. Consumption of fish here keeps growing, and as do consumption, as you rightly mentioned, as incomes grow. People look for alternative protein sources, and there's quite a vibrant sort of movement around here around fish as well. So it'll be great, and it won't be me in Delhi would not have to worry about eating fish only during the winters, because we always find summers is a not good time to eat with temperatures in 48 degrees and questions about cold chain supply. So yeah, you could have fish in the summer, Delhi, right? So that would be over 20 million people here. So it's in Delhi alone. So that'd be pretty good market for you. So all the best again, Lou.
And what Lavi is not telling you, Lou, is he salivated over your Instagram page and post, and he was like, I can't wait to eat that.
I'm a vegan, but I will definitely try seafood. I'm not sure I'll do that with a meat alternative, but the fish, yes, I do miss that. So was an avid sushi person before becoming vegan 5 years ago. So thanks again, Lou. All the very best, and keep us posted. Looking forward to talking to you again soon.
I look forward to it too. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.